consciousness formed in those words, those ancient words, the Lord's Prayer. I invite us to close our eyes if you're comfortable doing so, or find something to gaze at as a prayerful focus. Our Father, our Creator, our Mother, our Creator, O Thou of many names and Thou of no name, from the heavenly celestial consciousness, expansive, without limit, this holy experience, this holy ground, is our ground, and we give thanks. We are so grateful for all that has drawn us together in this awareness and in this place. The divine order, expressing in all and through all. We include in our awareness our family, our friends, the many communities that we share in. We remember today, as we come into this awareness of the power and the presence of God, we remember to presence those that are hungry, those that are suffering and imprisoned in mind, body, spirit. And together in this heavenly kingdom, the celestial, expansive realization of the power of God, we know that we are together and that God is working together through all for a greater good, and we rest in peace now to let God do the holy work in us and through us. Thank you, oh dear oneness that I call God, my own eternal self. I declare in the Christ awareness, I of myself can do no thing. Yet the power of God accomplishes all good through me. Even now, in this spiritual humility, I know that all are blessed and all are made better. Dedicate this goodness for all, for the water, the earth, the air, all living creatures and all living things. In the ancient language of Jesus, Amen, Amen. We plant this vision and this dedication in the earth that it may grow, and so it is. Amen.
Please join me with our thoughts and prayers. Our thoughts are prayers, and we are always praying. Our thoughts are prayers. Take charge of what you're saying. Seek a higher consciousness, a state of peacefulness, and know that God is always there. And every thought becomes a prayer. Amen. We have Reverend Kathy Long. There goes my daily word. I'll keep that handy. Well, friends, I've been introduced already a little bit as somebody that has certainly been here with this community years ago. It's been many years. And I want to welcome all those that are here today. And we know that there are those that join us from afar that we may never see. But this ministry has created a way to share with those that are far away or those that are needing to be at home today and take really good care of themselves, right? So I want to appreciate that this ministry continues to do the work of unity that was started over 130 years ago. And we remember that Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, and Myrtle, who started the work in her home, probably with about this many people sitting in her living room, in prayer together, knowing that that which we call God is the transformative power that is able to work in us and through us and as us, for us and for all, and that our lives become transformed and better as we continually work this in our consciousness. It's not a lightning bolt coming out of the sky, and sometimes it might seem like that, but rarely is that true for most of us. Most of us get up every day and do the work in consciousness. And as I think of the technology that we utilize today, I think of Charles Fillmore and how he used to get up and use a radio to beam a message that actually we know today now in Unity was often showing up on the African continent. And we have more and more ministers now in our outreach associations throughout the world that are being ordained, and many of them are from that African continent. Isn't that amazing and wonderful to think about? So we may not know where this broadcast goes today, but we trust and I dedicate it for the greater good of all, as we shared in our meditation. So about, it's only been 6 months ago now, I finished serving as a senior minister for a Unity Church in Plymouth, Michigan. Precious community of people, just as this is. And I followed my inner guidance that had started knocking at my heart at the beginning of this year. And it was not the guidance that I anticipated. No, at least I didn't think I would be retiring from center ministry at this stage of the game, as I think of it, the game of life and how to play it. And we play it with God, but God always has that guidance that might be a little different than what we thought. And so I did retire from serving as the senior minister there at Friends of Unity in June. And I began to continually work with a question. And this question is, will I set aside my selfish interests? You know what selfish interests are? You know, like what you want, when you want it, and how you want it, right? Mm-hmm. And will I set aside those selfish interests and remake my life for the sake of the earth and the children that will inherit her? This is the working question of my soul. And as we share together today, I want you to know that, because I'm asking you to hold me in prayer too. I'm following this guidance to bring a message of post-doom spirituality wherever I go. And we certainly have a lot of doom and gloom in the news today. And, you know, some of that I think is rightly there. We need to face up that we humans have had quite an effect on the earth, the water, the air, and it's having quite an effect on our children. But we have, as we know in Unity, the ability to address anything that is happening in our lives, and that the answer is always going to be spiritual. And so that spiritual answer that works in us is going to reveal to us new ideas and new ways of living together and living on the earth. And so let's be about that today. And I had a message title when Reverend Brian got a hold of me and asked if I could be here today. And I want to thank him and appreciate him for all that he does in the work of this ministry and the work that he does throughout the world. And I quickly came up with a message, the healing power of gratitude. Well, that's a logical title with Thanksgiving coming. I know that, you know that, right? But I want us to put our attention on healing power. I want us to really explore that today. So that's what we're here to learn together. And see if something new doesn't come forward for each of us, because that's what was true in those days when Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founders of Unity, were going out and listening to speakers just like you are today. They were just listening to people that were having insight. And that's what I am, a person of insight, just as you are. So we're going to explore that healing power, and I'm going to start with a little question, because I think it's a pertinent question. We got to always bring ourselves into the now moment, right? Ground ourselves right here. Are you ready for Thanksgiving? Is it all coming together for Thanksgiving? People will ask that question. Is everything coming together? Is it, like what? Yeah, it's all about Thanksgiving right now. Now, you would not know that going into the stores because they've got Christmas starting back in October.
Yes.
So, well, I don't know where Thanksgiving fits in the middle of all this, but we can ask ourselves to be together one day at a time. And just because consumerism wants us to buy stuff, we got Black Friday coming, you got to get out there and catch the sales. We want to overcome a consumerism mentality. And certainly Thanksgiving is about eating a lot.
Right.
Right? But let's ask ourselves what else it can be for us today. And I would say, is everything coming together for your family? Is everything coming together for you physically? Is everything coming together for you mentally, to have mental clarity in time of great change? Is everything coming together for you as a ministry? Do you see the evidence of the power of God, which is always for everything to work together to thrive, right?
Right.
That would be the evidence of God in our lives. And so when we look in our lives and our families and around, and we don't see it coming together and thriving, we might have some discontent. We're going to address that a little bit. But we've got to start there. We've got to be honest enough. We call that rigorous honesty. We've got to be honest enough to start right where we're at. Work with what we have. And then that which we call the power of God is going to work all things together for good. There's a great scripture found in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those that love God and who have been called according to that divine purpose. I've substituted a couple of words there because I don't use pronouns for God. I don't make God in the human image. I actually ask myself to understand what the ancients understood, which humans are made in the image and after the likeness of God. And so that doesn't include personality and pronouns in my book. You can take that or leave that, right? But I'm just asking us to notice that the ancients understood this thing that God works all things together for good. And we might understand that because, and think of it as a comforting verse, because at some point, a difficulty on its own may not make sense. You got a few of those? We got a few in the world. We got a lot in the world. Difficulties that don't make sense. But when it all comes together someday, and it does, then we understand this principle that's at work. And in unity, we often refer to the activity of God, that which is pressing out, the expression of God, that it works in these ways that are principles. They're unfailing. And you can look throughout the universe and the cosmos, and you can see these principles unfailing and at work. And we want to look, and we want to seek, and we want to understand. And we don't have to look away from the world, the material world. You just have to remember it's constantly changing and not to get too attached to our current understanding or perception of it. Well, I can tell you that this Thanksgiving, things are coming together for me, but I've got to be like you and be willing to see them change, right? Thanksgivings and families change over the years, and some of you that have known me for a while know that Matthew, my husband Matthew, has also been a friend of this ministry, longtime Unity minister. It's not just in the name now. We got quite a few years of ministering under our belt. But we have two sons and gave them great roots and we gave them wings. And you know what? They flapped those wings right out of the state. And they live in two different states. So we got to be together for our youngest son Isaac's wedding in September, but we won't be together around the table at Thanksgiving time. And I'm going to miss them, and I'm going to have an amazing time together, but not if I dwell in the fact that it's not the same, right? The Thanksgiving family table is not the same. Not only are the kids not at that table, but I sometimes wake up here in Michigan and think, wow, how did I get here? I am not from Michigan, even though I've been here 21 years. I've lived here longer than any other place that I've ever been. And I'm from Alaska. My family is in Alaska. My biological family, Matthew's family's out in Oregon. You know, it's like, wow, what am I doing here? You ever feel lost? Like, how did I get here? Well, I hope you relate to that, because that's part of the journey, is waking up and thinking, oh, how did I get here? And again, we might wake up and have a little bit of discontent as we measure our lives. And we want to talk about that, but I want us to continually ask ourselves, what is the healing power of today, or Thanksgiving? For me, it's about thanks living. You've heard that before too, I'm sure. Thanks living. It's a power unto itself. But when we ask ourselves about the healing power to sit down at a table, if you don't have anybody to join you at your table, and how to deal with loneliness, and how to deal with grief, and how to deal with change, right? We want to know the healing power. The power of God is that, in my view. God works all things together for good. That's evidence of healing. The word healing comes from an ancient root, which means to bring together. It means to mend, right? Like think about bones that have been broken and they're mending, they're coming together, right? Or we can think of it even as knitting together. So healing is an activity that brings together. And that's what we can turn to within our own consciousness, no matter who's at the table or who's not at the table. So as we explore the healing power of God, I was thinking about this beautiful affirmation. We hold the affirmative state of consciousness and unity as something that can really help us to do the work in consciousness, to realize the spiritual answer to whatever is going on in our lives. And I've had this on my desk since the beginning of this year. I am grateful for the activity of truth in my consciousness right now. I am grateful for the activity of truth, capital T, in my consciousness right now. The activity of truth, capital T, is that which is unchanging. This is the healing power of God. It is working all things together for good. And it's in my consciousness, and it is like a seed. Why don't you affirm it with me? I'm grateful for the activity of truth in my consciousness right now. Yeah. I am grateful for the activity of truth in my consciousness right now. So right now is all we've got. And there's an activity of God in our consciousness right now, and we can understand it to be a truth that is going to help us see things in new ways, a truth that is going to clear our vision, a truth that is going to melt away our grievances, a truth that is going to allow us to be at the table with anybody, anywhere. Because the healing power of truth for me isn't about avoiding people at the table. We all got people in our family we're thinking, oh my gosh, well, I don't even think I want to be around that person anymore. You got a few of those?
Yeah.
Okay. Or it's real easy to do nowadays. You can just not show up, right? Or you can move away, or you can just avoid and not engage. But that's not the power of truth in my consciousness. It's not avoiding me. It's not avoiding you. That's not the power of God and how God works. It's not saying, well, I'm not going to show up until you get your act together there, Kathy Mom. That's not how God works. So the way the power and the activity of truth works in my consciousness and in your consciousness and in every part of this universe, it shows up 100% of the time in 100% of its expression, which is power. The power to live from wholeness and aliveness and joy and freedom, to be free with the freedom of spirit. You know, that great Ram Dass quote, if you want to know if you're enlightened, go visit your family.
Yeah.
Well, it's this time of year, like we got the family things coming right along. Yeah. If you want to know if you've got a consciousness of truth at work, go to your family. See what wants to come through. It's Mary Mana Marissi that wrote a book, and if you haven't heard of her, she is a colleague. She's a minister, she's an author, she's a life coach, and she was the co-founding minister of a very large ministry out in Oregon where Matthew and I used to live. And in her book, the book called Building Your Field of Dreams, she says, respect the feeling that is nudging you toward a greater experience. So if you have a desire to have a greater experience on a Thanksgiving day or today, if you have a desire to have a greater experience at Christmas or any day with your family, with your neighbors, she says, respect that feeling because it's always nudging us to the greater experience. And that greater experience often comes from a certain kind of intensity of experience, just as a seed, when it has the pressure of weather and it opens up and the weather and it begins to root itself and grows, but it will grow stronger because of the winds and everything else that goes with being a seed on planet Earth. The same is true of us. Jesus said that. The great teacher said that the kingdom of God is like a seed. It's like a seed. And Jesus also is known to have said, the kingdom of God is in you and at hand. And so if we want to understand ourselves, it may be that sometimes it is those experiences that are challenging us, that bring out, that nudge us to the greater. So I thought of a story. It's a story of a girl who moved with her parents to a different state, and they were following their dream. The girl's stepfather was going after the dream of being a mechanic, an airline mechanic. Went to Tulsa, Oklahoma, to the aeronautics school there. It was a long distance for them to move, and only to find out that he was colorblind. He didn't realize his whole life he was colorblind. And he had some support. He was a Vietnam vet and was going to be a new lease on life. And it wasn't what he thought it was going to be. And the money was tight, and they weren't in their hometown where it was easy to borrow money in those days, and there they were. And it was coming up for Christmas, and things weren't going to be the same, and there wasn't going to be money for a Christmas tree. And the parents were, they were despairing, and they were upset, and life wasn't doing for them what they thought it was going to do for them. It was all those things that parents go through. But the girl, seeing the parents in despair, had this thought about making a tree out of construction paper. She was quite crafty, and she got a green construction paper and made a tree and taped it to the wall. And I will say to you that the parents were influenced by that. I'm sure they thought it was sweet and precious and wonderful and all those things. But for the girl, it was the learning of the life lesson that things may not be one way. Things may seem like there is no way that this can possibly happen, to have a real Christmas, but there could be a different way. And that the preciousness of that holiday was being together, even though it was in a foreign place. Now that child was me. That was me living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with my mother and my then stepfather from Nome, Alaska, thousands of miles away from family. But we were able to reap and find some gratitude in that child's ability to be resourceful and adaptive. And that's what I believe that the seed of God in us is designed for. That no matter what challenge what we have in life or the discontent we have when things aren't going our way, it is just, again, the Christ awareness that says, become as a child. You cannot enter the kingdom of heaven except for that you become as a child. To become that open and curious and, adaptable and resourceful expression of the divine that the whole universe is. Why would we think that we would be different? And things always have to be the same. And you always got to have a turkey. Now I'm bringing that up. Because we've been living in our culture for a long time, and you got to have a turkey. And there are a lot of people that are questioning, what are you doing on Thanksgiving anyway? This was a lousy thing for the indigenous people of this continent, and it was. So what are we really going to celebrate on Thanksgiving? What story will we bring to the table? How do we address our willingness to own up that things aren't as they seemed? Will we go and chase down the cheapest turkey, knowing that those turkeys were probably treated in the most inhumane of ways? Or will we be willing to say, maybe not a turkey this year on my budget, because I'm not going to be able to pay the price that my local farmer pays, but my local farmer is the one that's treating the creatures in a more humane way. You see where I'm going with this? We've got a whole slew of holidays ahead of us. We got all kinds of things, but our spiritual practices are meant to help us in today and to live our lives with our families and to have a new thought and invest in a new way in all of creation, because God works all things together for good for all. Not just some of us some of the time, but for all. So when we get on with that assignment here on earth, we can transform everything that we're dealing with right now, but we may have to change. So how does that look? Here's another little story, a little analogy for you to try on. Comes straight out of meditation for me. But imagine people are coming to the table for Thanksgiving and, and there's the person that wants to talk politics and everybody's rolling their eyeballs, okay? And then there's the person that comes in late all the time, and then there's the person that cooked the turkey that's saying everything's cold, like you just want to have a family dinner or you just want to get together. There's everybody. Somebody else is in there watching the game, and can't you just hold dinner? But you're just there to come together, and you're thinking, how do I do that? And at one point, you're just wanting to throw your hands up, give up, and walk away. But what if you stay? What if you deal with the discontent of all that and pray? Our thoughts are prayers. What if we ask ourselves and to ask God, how can all things come together for good in this? And then be able to be there at that table with people or no people. Because some people will be having that day and will be today on their own. How can God work all things together for good? You've seen it happen before. You've seen the person that's so calm and is talking with the little ones, and the little ones start gravitating to the person that's in peace, right? Mm-hmm. The little ones know where it's safe in that experience. You know what it feels like when somebody says, can we have a blessing for this meal? Even though it wasn't part of the bigger plan. You know how everybody just kind of stops for a moment and just follow a blessing? You see, it just takes one person not to give up in a family, in a ministry, in a neighborhood. It just takes that one person to go to God and to know that God can work all things together for good and create that peace within. I leave you with a little quote. It's a quote that comes from our wonderful Henry David Thoreau. I learned this, at least by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of dreams, the dream of all things working together for good, that'd be my dream, and endeavors to live the life with which they have imagined, then that person will meet with success unexpected in common hours. That person will put some things behind and will pass an invisible boundary. New and universal and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within. The old laws will seem to be expanded and interpreted in a favor, in a more liberal sense, and that person will live with a license of a higher order of beings. Let's be that, friends. The healing power of gratitude. Let's be grateful for our opportunity to be together today, life on life's terms, family members, the way they're going to be or not going to be, and the holidays being a place for all things to come together for good. Thanks for being here. And again,
one more clip. It takes me. No, not usually that long.
Click on the arrow?
yeah, here you go.
Just hit the space. Raindrops on roses and whispers on kittens, bright copper kettles and buttons, brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are all my favorite things. Doorbells and sleigh bells and schnitzel and moonlights, wild geese and violets and and ribbons. These are all my favorite things. Girls in white dresses, blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and my ashes, silver white roses that melt in the spring. These are all my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad. Raindrops and roses and whispers on kittens, bright copper kettles and longwood mittens, brown paper packages tied up with strings. These are a few of my favorite things. Colored ponies and crisp apple strudel, Doorbells and sleigh bells and schnitzel with noodles, doggies that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. Girls in white dresses with blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and eyelashes, silver white winters that melt into springs. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so